Pondering God, Chapter 101, Slippin' into Darkness. The past few years I've made a conscious effort to move further and further away from pop culture, and television, being one of the linchpins of pop culture, is the one area I have focused on the most. However, there are still moments when I just want to vegetate and give my mind a rest, and television is good for that. I love mysteries and detective work, but the mainstream shows aren't exactly what I desire. I'm tired of the car chases, the explosions and gunfire, the politically correct casting that looks as if it came from a fashion magazine. I'm tired of all the cliches that make up today's programming. All the shows have a similar cast: the sensitive guy, the tougher-than-nails woman, the geeky, trendy nerd, and of course the token minority, of which there are dozens from which to choose. I thought I found the solution when I discovered PBS and all the BBC cop show reruns. Here I found a more cerebral approach to the art of detective work, more in line with Sherlock Holmes. I found that clues, motives, fingerprints, murder weapons, and interviewing suspects were all important in finding the killer, all with less explosions and car chases and shoot-'em-ups. Shows and plots that made me think, and move slow enough that I had time to do just that. But I found, like the rest of the secular media, the BBC is in the business of sending messages and promoting an agenda, and their agenda isn't the same as mine. A few nights ago, my wife and I settled in for our weekly whodunit, and it wasn't long into the show when an agenda statement involving a current social and cultural hot button was inserted into the typical murder mystery plot. One of the detectives, who apparently had been hiding this from his supervisor, was revealed to be a homosexual, gay in today's parlance. It wasn't enough to reveal that fact, and before long he was standing in his living room engaged in a deep, passionate French kiss with one of the male suspects in the recent murder investigation. My wife immediately stood up, said she wasn't watching any more of it, and went upstairs to take a shower. I too was taken aback and uncomfortable with what was being portrayed on the screen. I was hopeful though and said, that's probably all they're going to show, assuming the program will get back to solving the murder. Within 5 minutes the two men were shown lying in bed together in a fond embrace, with one of them smoking the obligatory cigarette, presumably after having sex together. I turned off the show, disappointed that I would be shortchanged on my weekly mystery-solving experience. It wasn't long before I wondered why I had the reaction I did. Why was I squeamish when presented with a less than graphic portrayal of homosexuality? Why was I uncomfortable? Of course, the cultural left will shout homophobe from the rooftops, but I'm not much concerned with their ranting. Why was this specific sin having such an impact? Why did I feel the need to look away? After all, on television screens around the world there are murders, adulteries, kidnappings, gossip, lying in abundance, sex outside of marriage, and a plethora of other sins displayed day after day, week after week. I don't turn away from those sins. They don't bother me at all. After much thought, I concluded that the long list of sins that I've become comfortable with are those with which I'm familiar. I've either indulged in them myself or thought about it. And the other reason is, they've been drummed into my mind as common everyday occurrences. And they are. They are the nature of mankind. Homosexuality, on the other hand, is an uncommon sin, as are bestiality and pedophilia, and one that I haven't been exposed to as much. If the secular media gets its wish, I will be. How else to dull the senses and lead everyone to believe that what is portrayed on the screen is normal, and not only normal, but good? I'm not so much interested in picking on homosexuality as I am interested in my reaction to it, and how the secular world is attempting to normalize it. The truth is, God hates sin, all sin. Psalm 5 verse 4 says, "For thou art not a God who takes pleasure in wickedness, no evil dwells with thee." And again in Hebrews chapter 1 verse 8, quoting from Psalm 45, "Thou hast loved righteousness and hated lawlessness." God does not prefer one sin over another, and because of his hatred for sin, he sent Jesus to the cross to pay the ultimate price. When Jesus hung on the cross, it is recorded that darkness fell over the whole land until the 9th hour. And then Jesus was quoted as saying, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" It has been said that these two events, the darkness and Jesus' words, are indicative of a holy God unable to look at his Son, who took on the entirety of the world's sin. If God turns away from and cannot look at sin, then why do I not have the same reaction? The short answer is, I have a sin nature and he doesn't. I live in a sin-filled world, but God cannot abide it. So why does Satan, through a secular world, continue to anesthetize us to sin. One motive would be to remove the guilt from those who practice sin. If everyone is doing it, then it must be okay. Paul said it well in Romans chapter 1. After giving a laundry list of sins, Paul says this about those who practice them in Romans chapter 1, verse 32. And although they know the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but also give hearty approval to those who practice them. The other motive for anesthetizing us to sin is to numb our senses. Paul writes to the Christians in Ephesians chapter 4, verses 17 through 19. This I say, therefore, and affirm together with the Lord, that you walk no longer just as the Gentiles also walk, in the futility of their mind, being darkened in their understanding, excluded from the life of God, because of the ignorance that is in them, because of the hardness of their heart, and they, having become callous, have given themselves over to sensuality, for the practice of every kind of impurity with greediness. Satan's ultimate deception is to get us to believe what I heard said by a character on a television show last night. There is no good or evil, there are only people. When you believe that, he's got you. And when you are in that place, the resulting reality is explained in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 26. For if we go on sinning willfully, after receiving the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins. If there isn't good and evil, there isn't sin. And if there isn't sin, there is no need for salvation, and Jesus died needlessly. You might say to me, but isn't the church made up of sinners? Who are you to judge? I would say in response, yes, the church is made up of sinners, of which I am the worst. But the majority of sinners that make up the church come before God, not in defiance and promoting their sins, but with fear and trepidation, ashamed of their sins. Followers of Christ don't have parades celebrating and reveling in their sins, but they do have celebrations and joyful singing in recognition that their sins are forgiven. It wasn't that many years ago when the idea of abortion would have turned the average person's stomach, but today there's a video on YouTube of an abortion counselor, whatever that is, having her own abortion filmed because she wanted to show women there is such a thing as a positive abortion story. In the video, she can be seen smiling and humming a tune. Once we start down the path leading into darkness, there is no telling where it will end. Pedophilia, bestiality, pederasty, coming soon to a theater or television near you. From Genesis chapter 6, verse 5, Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. The last two lines from the Temptation song referenced in the title of this piece are, You've been slipping into darkness, pretty soon you're gonna pay.